and welcome to another episode of the Access Vikings podcast. I'm Emily Leiker, and I'm joined by my Minnesota Star Tribune colleagues, Andrew Krammer and Ben Goessling. We are a week away from the draft. Check that, a week. I was going to make a fake little countdown and have it so that we were like, oh, I got my countdown clock. But we are a week away from the draft. It's Thursday. We spent this morning at least, out at TCO in Eagan talking with Vikings general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Next week, this is probably about the time of day where we'll be prepping our bags and our backpacks to head over to TCO for night one of the draft. But Ben, just give us your instant takeaways of what we heard from Kwesi today. It was mostly focused on where they're going with the draft next week and the beginning of their offseason program, which starts next week as well.
Yeah, it was a lot of draft philosophy stuff, and I suppose I put my thumb on that scale a little bit because I was interested to hear more on some of his thoughts on this. But writing about a lot of this for my newsletter tomorrow, they have really taken a very different approach to the draft. I mean, we have enough data on him now to see the approach they've taken in the draft is markedly different than what they've done before. I think he's taken 23 players in 3 drafts. Rick Spielman's last 3 drafts had 38. So in other words, Rick Spielman took as many players in 2 drafts as Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has taken in 3, leaving out, of course, the 15 pick marathon of 2020, was it? Was my eye roll significant enough for that to see how I felt about covering that draft? It has been very different. And Kwesi got into some of the thought process with this today in terms of certainty versus uncertainty of free agency versus drafted players. And I think he understands the perils of this, certainly has lived them because they have not been very good in drafts, but he also sees and studies enough of this to say this is not a guaranteed source of talent. It is a guaranteed source of cheap talent, of controllable talent, but I think they have kind of use this as one strategy among several. And it's interesting to hear some of his philosophical thoughts on this. We didn't get a lot of like, yeah, we're looking to trade up, we're looking to trade back. We like this position. We don't like this one. But the philosophy stuff I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, we'll talk more about some of the draft-centric stuff, or at least it'll get kind of sprinkled in during the rest of our conversation today. But Andrew, you had I guess it's tangentially draft related because it will come immediately after the draft potentially, but you asked where they're at in trying to find a veteran backup quarterback to pair with JJ, which has obviously been a big story of this offseason. What did you think about his answer to that and kind of tell us where he stood with that conversation?
Yeah, and maybe it was my fault for phrasing the question this way, but it just asked him about after the draft and the comp pick situation, because he had referenced that at his pre or post free agency news conference and alluding to that's why they were waiting. And he said it's not all about that. He talked about adding Jonathan Grenard last year, which was one of their first moves in free agency, and said that negated a comp pick. It was just an interesting analogy that he brought up, but one that made me think his response was about something more than just what was being asked there. Maybe there's just to speculate, there could be people wondering why they're waiting at this point to what's a 4th round pick worth to you. We hear coaches talk all the time about give me players now. Don't wait for comp picks in 2026 or 7 or the future. But this is why they're waiting. It's obviously a huge reason why they're waiting is to get through the draft, get to Monday, as Ben talked about. That is when veteran additions, unrestricted free agents will not count against that formula, but the options are dwindling. And I imagine somebody like Kevin O'Connell is getting a little restless seeing Joe Flacco go elsewhere. We don't know their interest in Drew Lock, but even him going to Seattle right now, it's Carson Wentz, it's Ryan Tannehill, it's Tyler Huntley. Like there are very few options available still on the open market. And of course, Aaron Rodgers as well.
Of course. He would not want us to forget about him.
But it was an interesting answer and one that made me think that he was talking about more than just he seemed to want to talk more about the comp pick thing than the actual quarterback thing. But he did say we're not going to rush it either way. Does not sound like they've got some agreement in place, or not one that he wanted to at least talk about. that they're going to right away agree to and sign somebody come Monday after the draft. But it's a position they need to add to. It's not one that they're probably looking to add a rookie to, considering the youth that they already have in JJ McCarthy and Brett Rippon, who's relatively inexperienced as well. But we know they like Rippon. We know he was a scout team player of the week for them multiple times last year. Kevin O'Connell talks glowingly about him. It might play into a little bit of why they haven't rushed to sign somebody. But as Kwesi said, they're still not going to be in a rush after the draft to sign somebody either.
I still feel like it'll come. There will be some sort of quarterback signing pretty soon after that deadline passes. I can't see them waiting any longer. Like, you want that guy in there for OTAs and all of this offseason program. You don't want him in there 2 weeks before preseason games start, right? Like, that'd be crazy.
Probably not. Although I guess it's probably worth remembering that when they traded for Nick Mullins a couple of years ago, that was after they played them in the preseason. So we have seen this in the past where they add a guy in the middle of August and then he ends up playing a fairly significant role over the next couple of years. Certainly became a pretty consistent voice in that quarterback room. So, I mean, that's not ideal, but we have seen them go down that road before. So I guess you can't really rule anything out unless they do it. But yeah, in an ideal world, you want that guy in there, because if you don't feel good about JJ McCarthy for some reason, you want somebody that can get the reps, that can get work in with Justin Jefferson and the rest of that crew, not trying to catch up in August. You want to be here for all the install stuff and all of that work that people talk about all the time, that banked time matters during the year, just to develop timing and chemistry. And hey, I want this route broken off at 12 yards, not 14. And if I have to do it, where do you want the ball thrown, all that kind of stuff. That work can happen this time of year. So you ideally would want somebody there to maximize that time, especially if you feel like you need to use that person at some point.
What did you guys think about one of the comments that he had made about, and I want to go back and read it verbatim, but just about them being proactive instead of reactive and filling their needs in free agency and all that? He had said, you have to earn the right to be the type of team and the type of organization that drafts for impact and not for need. We were able to do that a lot in what we were able to do in free agency and what we've done the last couple years to build to that place. I mean, what do you think about that? It's basically saying he feels like the roster's at a spot where we don't have any glaring holes that we feel like we have to fill.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting too. Go ahead, Emily.
I was going to say, I think this kind of speaks to what we've said at the top of each of these past two position previews that we've done, where like there's really kind of an argument every which way for like where they could go in the first round and even beyond that. Like there's 6 or 7 positions that you could reasonably say they should add someone here, but they could also get away with not adding anyone there. And I think this must have been like right after or right before that, but he mentioned something about like last year's draft and the gun to the head need of needing a quarterback. And they don't have a gun to the head need this year. Like it's just a bunch of positions where it's like, hey, like you'd probably be best to add someone here, but I could see why you would go a different direction.
Yeah. And I think part of this is they have been able to fill the roster free agency wise, and they've done it without putting themselves in the kind of position where they have to just fill up with cheap talent. I mean, we're going to see them do that. They're going to have undrafted free agents come in as well. But, I look at this, the Spielman years towards the end, especially, yes, they were draft and developed. They wanted everybody to know it. They made it a big priority every time they'd sign a free agent or sign one of their draft picks to a long-term contract. It was the big splashy, let's time up the announcement at the beginning of training camp. Let's have the bro hugs with the cameras there, bring everybody in. And this is another example of why we've been able to draft and develop and keep our own and all of these kinds of things. That was very much part of the identity, but they also got to a point where they had to hit on drafts because they had so many guys signed to these big, lucrative, long-term deals that you couldn't get out of very easily. And this has not been the approach. And some of it is the cap is going up. It's a different market with the TV contracts doing what they've done, and you're out of COVID and all of those things. But they have, I also think, been able to manage cap hits well enough that they continue to add players. They continue to add depth in the free agent market. We saw them do that last year. It's been a lot of these free agents that maybe aren't quite at the top of the market because there's a concern about injury or concern about age, and you're betting on getting more out of those guys than other teams may have seen them being able to produce. But it does put them in a position where they're not maybe leaning on the drafts quite as much. And you also have the fact that you're not paying a quarterback $35 million a year for the first time since 2017. So there, I think, are a number of different things that go into this that do give them a little more ability to kind of diversify their portfolio, so to speak, in the draft, and allows them to go a number of different ways. Whereas we've seen this in the years past. I mean, it used to be pretty easy to figure out what they were going to do. It was, hey, they need a wide receiver. Okay, Laquan Treadwell. They need a center, Garrett Bradbury. They need, a tackle, Brian O'Neill, Christian Darrisaw. I mean, all of these kinds of things sort of telegraph themselves. I don't think they're quite in that spot, at least right now.
We've talked about defensive backs. We've talked about both sides of the line. Now we kind of have our final part 3 of this position previews we've done. And I've just told everyone to bring a grab bag of whoever else, whatever other position they think the Vikings might could need in the draft, and maybe some players that interest them. Before we name players specifically, what positions did each of you kind of gravitate towards? My list is all tight ends and wide receivers.
I went all running backs pretty much, because that was the one that, in terms of off the board, like what is the kind of surprise position they might add from. I still wouldn't be shocked if they went with somebody there, just considering, Aaron Jones is going to be 32 at the end of his contract. And I think Jordan Mason's a great back, but he was always part of a committee with San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, wide receiver is kind of the one for me that I think there's a need. I mean, this has been a team that 2022, at least, they had 3 receivers catch at least 60 passes in addition to TJ Hawkinson. And they're not quite that team anymore. They're not going to play quite that way, but there is a need for depth there. Well, number one, because they use 3 receivers a lot. Jalen Naylor is probably going to be part of the mix there, but you could use another competitive player in that position. Number 2, Jordan Addison is still in LA courts with the possibility of a conviction on that drunken driving charge from last year, and NFL suspension could follow that, which maybe takes him out for 3 games. And number 3, he's heading into the 3rd year of his contract. Are they going to pay him the deal he's probably going to be looking for in a year or two when they're paying Justin Jefferson what they're paying him? So I do wonder about wide receiver as a possible need. I think we're all kind of tracking along those same lines of get JJ McCarthy some additional weapons to work with. But yeah, I think that one, because of some of the extraneous factors that are at that position, could be something they need to invest into.
We are already not Brian Flores' favorite front office. I think he hates us.
He got all his players in free agency, and
That's
now
true.
the draft. Now Kevin O'Connell's like, hey, we need to fill some stuff out over on this other side.
There's a need for a corner and a defensive tackle too. We'll put that in there. But
that's true. I suppose we've already talked
about that.
Yeah, we already talked about his guys. Come on, Brian.
Listen to the other pods, Flo, as we got it all covered. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry. We're just not throwing an edge rusher in here or anything like that. I think Grenard and Van Ginkel have that down pat, and Dallas Turner. Andrew, let's start with you and hear about some of your running backs that you pulled, that you were intrigued by here.
Sure. Yeah. I'll start with one that the Vikings actually brought in, one of their top 30 visits, Brashard Smith out of Southern Methodist. He's somebody that when you look at how Daniel Jeremiah, you look at how Lance Zierlein at the NFL.com, kind of the standard bearers of these evaluations, at least that a lot of people use. These are guys who could be available in the fifth. If you'll hear Rich Eisen talk about him right there as I pull up the list here. But he's somebody that will go 4th, 5th round projected to, possibly 6th round. The Vikings have picks in the 5th and 6th rounds now going into this year. I'm not going to be surprised if they don't pick a running back in this draft and wait till undrafted free agency. But I think when we're picking positions that they might surprise people with, this is one that I was kind of drifted toward, because Aaron Jones, like I said, will be 32 at the end of his contract. Ben, you wrote about how Kevin O'Connell talked about Mason coming in here to help spell Aaron Jones. all those things. Those two guys will be the 1-2 punch for the next 2 years. But they saw what it was like to, and know firsthand what it's like to try and bring in Ty Chandler and have him learn on the fly and contribute right away, and just seeing how it didn't work out and how all your best laid plans can kind of go away if you're forcing a young guy into these positions that he's not ready for. So this is the perfect runway to get a guy like Brashard Smith, or get a guy like Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt out of Arizona, who was really good for New Mexico 2 years ago before running into an eligibility issue with the NCAA last year and really getting buried in this draft class as a guy who has the talent, but just not the name to be a top pick. So there's going to be guys in the mid to late rounds that, from what's considered to be a really deep class. And Kwesi did not want to talk about his thoughts on these draft classes or strengths or weaknesses. He said, quote, "I don't want to go on record before the draft." But he would probably not be alone in saying that this is supposed to be a really strong running back class, meaning that guys are going to get pushed down the board. Guys who are in the 5th, 6th rounds might be 3rd or 4th rounders in different drafts. That might entice them to pull the trigger on somebody sooner rather than later, and get a talent who could learn and develop behind 2 decent running backs and then be ready to go once Aaron Jones' time is up.
I think the running back need and the tight end need are very similar to me. And I do think the way that, because I asked Kwesi about the tight ends, I think the way he addressed it was very fair in that he was like, it's a champagne problem need. Like, yes, we want another person in there. Yes, we need another person in there. But also, like, if they were to just have Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, they would probably be fine. If they were to just have TJ Hawkinson and Josh Oliver, they could make do. Would it be better to have a third guy at both of those positions? And would you probably want it to be someone they draft who can grow into the next kind of generation at those positions, considering the kind of older talent you have in there, particularly with Aaron Jones? Like, yes, but it's not, they're both positions where it's kind of like, okay, maybe we don't need someone immediately, so can we get away with not doing it right now?
But I think on the running back thing, the other point I'd add, Andrew, I agree with the idea of they need to develop somebody. And one of the reasons for that is we hear coaches talk all the time about running backs needing to learn pass protection at this level. And that's a big adjustment given the fact that college quarterbacks don't drop back very much. It's 2 steps. You throw a quick pass. You're not having to pick up a ton of blitzes. Obviously, things are more complex at this level. That was a big problem for Ty Chandler, is learning to do that. If you have that time, it helps you develop a guy to the point where when he's needed in a couple of years, when Aaron Jones is gone, that helps. And the other piece of this is the other guy they use as a third down back and a pass protector quite a bit is CJ Ham, who is in his 30s as well, and I think is in the last year of his contract. So you're going to have a lot of turnover in that third down back, blitz pickup guy kind of depth chart over the next couple of years. And you don't necessarily want that person, say in 2026, to be Jordan Mason, who may be more of the bell cow, or, maybe it's even 27 that he's more of this, and then a guy that's coming in brand new. That time to develop that player and teach him that part of the game, I think, is useful. So if you get ahead of it, like Andrew's talking about, I think it makes sense on that front as well.
Ben, let's hear about your wide receiver picks.
So a couple for me here, and I don't think this is a first round type thing. I mean, I don't think this is going to be something they, Luther Burden or Emeka Egbuka, I don't think they're going to go that way if they're sitting there at 24. But, 3rd round, I wouldn't be stunned if a guy like Jaden Higgins from Iowa State is around. It's a different body type than they've had. This is not a team that's had a lot of big receivers. And he's a little more possession type, but he's a guy that I think can body people up in the red zone. And they've needed that type of receiver. I mean, Hawkinson is some of that as well. But if you have somebody that can be physical and come up with a contested catch in tight areas, I think that's something that they could use in that room as a whole. Not going to be a guy that probably changes the picture from a deep threat perspective or anything like that. But he's somebody that intrigued me a little bit. And then Jack Beck from TCU is probably the one that stuck out the most to me, because you hear him compared a lot to Cooper Kupp. If you've listened to us talk about Cooper Kupp at all, there are a lot of fans of Cooper Kupp in that building, a lot of guys who made a lot of money because of Cooper Kupp and are in their current positions because of that. So they know Cooper Kupp well enough to look at him and say, yeah, I don't know if I quite see those comparisons, but the ability to play a number of different places on the route tree, his ability to beat corners, beat press coverage, all of those kinds of things have stuck out to people in the pre-draft process with him. So if they see some of those same comparisons with him and say, we can grow this guy into something like that, especially as a run blocker, which is something they want from their receivers and something they talk a lot about with Cooper Kupp. I think if they see those same comparisons, that's a credit to that type of a player. So I could see him being, third round, probably somebody that gets on their radar as well, if he's still there.
And Ben, when you talk about bigger receivers, in my head, it's screaming run block. They might actually be able to run block.
Yes, that is important because we see this all the time. I mean, this is something you see the Rams still do all the time.
Yeah.
Puka Nacua does it too, where you're playing those tight splits and you can line up with 3 receivers and get somebody else in a smaller personnel group because you can still get receivers that come in and block and you can run out of those formations. They don't have receivers with the size, or shall we say the motivation perhaps, or the inclination to lay out for such things. And I think the comeback to that would be, dude, you pay me $35 million to do a lot of things. This is not probably quite at the top of the list. So, I mean, that's fair. That's justifiable, but you do need somebody that can do those things in this offense. And yeah, those types of bodies, I think, would help in that regard.
That, and for the beloved quick game lovers out there who wanted to see more receiver screens, a bigger guy like that might help.
Yes, certainly would.
What was that one quote that Kevin had where he was like, something about the quick game? He was like, everyone wants me to play more quick game. Have you seen just went off about it? I think that was so funny.
Well, there was one at one point where he said, I would love to know a good quick game play for a 3rd and long or something like that. He's like, if anyone's got one for 3rd and 15, let me know.
Yeah, if you can have a screen that hits and block it up well enough. I mean, yeah, it's hard. It's not going to be something you go to on 3rd and 15 very often, but maybe that thing hits every once in a while if you're able to block it a little more effectively than they've been able to do.
Yeah, the 2 wide receivers I had down, and I think like a key, because of a lot of the things we've talked about, a key trait that I have honed in on in this draft for all of the positions they need is versatility, right? Because I think if they can find a steal in a guy who can play all around the field, whether it be in the secondary or across like playing slot versus outside at wide receiver, and kind of just mixing in with obviously what Justin Jefferson does and how creative they've had to get with him because of how covered he is, as we heard every single Monday press conference last year about him being double covered. So the 2 guys that I pulled out was, and this pains me as as someone who grew up near Seattle, was Washington State wide receiver Kyle Williams. He's a bit of a smaller guy, but he's apparently has really quick feet and has a seemingly pretty high ceiling. And so maybe a little bit more of a developmental guy at first, but plays all across the 3 receiver spots. And so they could switch him around there. And then the other one was a Pitt guy, which was a coincidence. I know that's where Addison started out, but Kanata Mumpfield was the other guy I had. And he stood out more because he's got that kind of jump game. He can go up for any ball, which I think they already have a little bit in Jefferson and Addison, but I think he's maybe has a little bit more height than them. I don't know off the top of my head, but those were the 2 names that stuck out to me. Wide receiver.
Probably more than Addison, probably a little less than Jefferson, but it's not a big receiver room.
No, right. So getting a little bulkier, slightly bigger guys in there would be a good thing. And I think that's where the tight ends come in too, right? And trying to get another bulkier, bigger receiving tight end. Obviously, we've talked a little about my guy, Rondé Gadsden from out at Syracuse, who I think the best pitch I have for him is that I think about that the Lions game at the end of last season when TJ Hawkinson kept getting targeted over the middle and just could not haul anything in. And that Gadsden, I watched him do things over the middle so many times. He's great in tight spaces and has the catch radius to kind of get around those linebackers and middle of the field defenders, safeties coming down, whatever it is. and the height too. Like, that's part of the catch radius is getting up. So I had him, and then I had Texas Tech's Jalen Conyers. Let me see if I can find his profile again. He was another one that was, he's a bigger guy. So he started out, or he's 265 pounds. Yeah. So he's like a thicker
like a Josh Oliver type.
Yeah. So I think that's good to have too. He had a high run blocking grade. So also something they're looking for. And I think like anytime you can find a tight end from college right now that already has good blocking skills, you should maybe try and take him, because there is a bigger conversation I think we will be having in the next few years about how college tight ends don't block anymore. Or at least the like draft caliber college tight ends don't block anymore. And so you're going to get all these NFL offenses that are having to teach college kids how to block.
It is so interesting with that whole thing, because we hear this about linemen. We're starting to hear it about, certainly with quarterbacks, you hear it with receivers, tight ends. The styles of play are so different offensively that, you hear about the schools that are in a pro style offense that you get guys, Iowa offensive linemen, Wisconsin, but probably a lot of players on their offense too, just the way they do things. But these schools that play in this type of offense produce more pro prospects that teams are more excited about. But yeah, you're right. It is so different that the prospect pool changes as a result of that.
And it makes me think of when Josh Oliver was coming out of San Jose State, and he talked about this when he signed with the Vikings a couple of years ago. He was not considered a good blocker. He was considered a receiving tight end who was a little skinny for his size. He goes to Baltimore, and they just had this vision of creating this mountain of a man that ended up coming to Minnesota all those years later. And to your guys' point, he was already in an era of college football that was going full spread, full air raid style in a lot of areas. I'm not sure if San Jose State was or not, but point being, a lot of places are like that. Offensive linemen come in saying, I haven't been in a 3-point stance since high school. That kind of stuff is crazy when we talk about who's going to come in and make an impact, when no one would have said Josh Oliver would be one of the best blocking tight ends in football when he came out of college. Everybody would have been like, there's a receiving guy. You can go get him if you need a receiver, but that's it. And it takes a vision, and it takes a follow through and an organization to really build a lot of these guys up. And that kind of dovetails with something Kwesi said today about how a lot of these positions take time. And he was talking about edge rusher. He brought up quarterback. But don't you guys think tight end is another one of those that if they were to need a guy in a few years, now is the time to add him, given the runway that they need?
Yeah, for sure. Same as we said with running back earlier when Ben made his point about needing to teach them blocking. You also need to teach the tight ends blocking.
Yeah, it just the whole thing. College football, certainly you're incentivized more than ever to win now, because transfer portals speed everything up and everybody's impatient. You need to produce guys that can win that game at that level. The NFL, your rookie contracts are 4 years. There's probably not a ton of patience with coaches. Some get more than others, but I don't think as a coach, you're typically banking on the idea of, they're going to give me 4 or 5 years to develop this player. There's so much of a push towards immediate production, immediate success, but the developmental piece of the game is changing to such a degree. Tom Brady talks about this all the time, that the level of football you're seeing is diminished because the focus on development can't happen in the same way. The offseason programs are shorter, and that's probably going to continue to happen. And there's good things in that too, for player safety and just giving players a little more margin in their lives. But it does become really difficult to hit the developmental piece of this. So the teams that can get it right and can develop players probably distinguish themselves, because to the extent that college football is a minor leagues for the NFL, that probably isn't serving the NFL as well as it once did, because everything is so different from what you're asked to do in college to what you're asked to do in the NFL.
For sure. No, for sure. Does anyone else have any other last minute throw in prospects here?
I should throw in JJ McCarthy's former teammate, the running back Khalil Mullins, who took over for forgetting his name, the guy who went to St. Louis, Blake Corum.
Yep.
He ended up, I think he was in Michigan for quite a few years, and then took over. And he was, according to PFF, he was one of the best through contact runners in football, even though he didn't reach 1,000 yards, still had 12 touchdowns. We talk about types that they don't have, or maybe types that they need. Jordan Mason's certainly that kind of guy. But if you can bring in a future 3-down back that you can grow as a full every down workhorse, that kind of size running back might be somebody they'd be intrigued by, because they need thumpers. They need people who can score short yardage, convert short yardage in goal line situations. And I think he's a guy, they had him on the top 30 as well. He's at least one of 3 running backs they had in there. And we know half of the list of the pre-draft visits that they had. So they're looking at running backs, and they're at least interested at some point in adding somebody.
Yeah. And I just think, I mean, we've talked about it in previous podcasts, but the safety thing, and Kwesi got asked about that a little bit today with Harrison Smith, and just said, Harrison told him there's going to be a day where I'm not here. And everybody's like, hey, yeah, but we don't need to worry about that right now. It is. I mean, that's kind of how Kwesi put his response. Like, yeah, that day's not today yet. It's probably in a year. And Josh Metellus is in a contract year. It's not a top of the line need right now, but I do think it's something they're going to think about, because those are 2 players that play very, very specific, very unique roles in this type of a defense, that if you're going to ask somebody, again, in this developmental kind of thing, it's part of why, Malachi Starks from Georgia is intriguing to me in the first round, because the variety of what he did at Georgia matches a lot of what Brian Flores asks those players to do in the NFL. And not everybody is going to get that. Not every Georgia safety is going to come in and get that, shall we say. I think that's another one of those positions where if you're looking a year down the road, 2 years down the road, it's worth keeping that in mind. They have enough different ways to go, especially with only 4 picks, at least as we sit now. This would be the smallest draft class in Vikings history. They have never had a draft class smaller than 5 picks in their 65 years. So obviously drafts got shorter. I think in 1993, it used to be 12 rounds. We went to 7, but still they have not had one this small. So it is very unique to see what they're going to do, especially because there are so many different, we've talked about how many different positions, even on this podcast. So fascinating to see what they do next week for sure.
Ben, you just gave me a great segue by throwing it back to the safeties, which was our first position preview that you and I did last week. And if folks listen to that, we talked about how the need beyond positional value and what players can do on the field is someone to fill the shoes of Cam Bynum in choreographing dances alongside Josh.
Is the big board ready?
And I have a surprise for everyone.
What?
She actually did it. Oh, wow.
This is my celebratory dancer big board that I took an hour on yesterday. So I'll leave it up on screen here for a second as we go through. I could not rank people actual number wise, so I went with this tier system. Let me pull it up so I can read it.
This is the only tier system in which Abdul Carter is only tier 2.
I know, but Travis Hunter is still in tier 1
for us on this.
So I know I should have uploaded some files. Maybe we'll drop them in the description on the YouTube.
Yes.
What I did,
yeah.
We want this is a standalone pod. Screw the rest of this. We want the whole thing.
A deep dive.
Yes.
We'll do the quick version now, and maybe we'll get into the deep version. I'll record a little one-off. But I went through. I just took the top defensive players, so top 50 or whatever. Went through everyone, tried to find everyone's TikToks, and then went to everyone's Instagrams. Tier one that I know this was my distraction at lunch yesterday. Tier 1, we had Travis Hunter, from Colorado, Mike Green from Marshall, and then Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky. And tier 1's classification was that there were videos of them dancing on their social media. So I physically got to see them dance with my own eyes.
Yep.
That's important.
Which is important.
Lean on the tape.
Emily, that's great scouting. Yeah,
and I had to go to the social media accounts directly because they don't show celebrations in college like that. They don't let you celebrate. They got the Ole Miss player peeing in the end zone a couple of years ago, and they were like, nope, cut it off. We're not doing this anymore. And so there's no videos of these guys celebrating. So you have to do the scouting that I did to get us here. Tier 2, so Abdul Carter, Penn State, and then Jalen Walker, Georgia. They both have kind of very characteristic celebrations. So
Like
like, let's see. I have my notes too. I wrote down a bunch of notes.
Gosh.
Love it.
Who am I looking for? Abdul Carter has like a little like kicking down the door celebration that he does where he'll get a sack or whatever. And then he goes and like kicks down the door and like does his little point. Yeah. I mean, none of these are unique anymore at this point, right? Like everyone repurposes from each other, but that was his that kept on coming up everywhere. And Jalen Walker has this nice little like strut that he does. Like he kind of like really like sways his shoulders and like walks a couple yards and stuff. So like I could see the potential for them, but I didn't see them dancing. And then finally tier 3 were these guys that like I could just tell in like their social media personas. This is something as a Gen Z I feel like I can read really well. Like I could tell that they would be into it. They would be into the idea of getting a little flashy and like doing these fun stuff. So that was Will Johnson from Michigan, Nick Scourton from Texas A&M, and Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, and then Xavier Watts, Notre Dame, and Malachi Starks, Georgia. Like Will Johnson, he got these super slick turnover glasses. They look like the shades that Joe Burrow, the Prada shades that Joe Burrow wore that one time.
Yeah.
And he like hands them around to all his teammates on the sideline.
Josh Metellus has some nice shades too. So maybe that's a good kind of connection.
Perfect. Yeah. And then like Nick Scourton dressed up in this insane cowboy outfit for one of his games where he had like a giant belt buckle on and was wearing a flannel and had the hat and like some sunglasses. And so there was showmanship. These guys had showmanship.
Yeah.
He'll get a line dance going. He'll get a line dance going for sure. Yep.
We'll see. That was the little big board research I did.
You're telling me, go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I love that your tier 3 scouting was just vibes. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, it's intangibles. I mean, sometimes this is what breaks the ties. So you're telling me that Malachi Starks could be the potential replacement for Harrison Smith and Cam Bynum.
Maybe.
Tell us. I mean, problem solved. Kwesi, we'll send you the fee. And we the first one's free. We'll talk about a long-term retainer here, but I think we've just figured out the first round of the draft. It's Malachi Starks. Maybe they trade up because if you can replace this many players at once, my mock draft is solved.
Yeah.
This is how consulting actually works too. So I think we just figured something out. You just do a little bit of work, tell us. Yep. Tell the team that, oh yeah, we know so much, do this, when really it was just vibes.
It was just vibes. I mean, you could just see it in the personas. It's like some guys, you go to their Instagram and it's only content that the school's posting, or it's only like their paid NIL ads that they're posting. Then you've got other guys who are just in there for the love of the game. They're posting for the love of the game. And that's what all of these guys were posting for the love of the game, but that was kind of where the tier 3 vibes came in. So some notable names left off, but I think Travis Hunter being number 1 overall should not have shocked anyone. He is like the perfect candidate for everything the Vikings might want to replace, but he is not going to be available to that.
No. So. His college coach was known for celebrating a bit on the field as well. In fairly memorable fashion.
Okay. Any last pre-draft comments? We'll have one more pre-draft pod, but it's going to be a little cut and dry, or it's going to be a little different. We'll talk about it in a second. But any other pre-draft comments or comments on Kwesi today?
I'm not going to follow that up. No.
I think we need to turn you loose so you can get back in the film room. Like, we want the film breakdown. We want this posted on the socials. This is one of a kind stuff. So yeah, I think we need to let you get back to work so you can start grinding tape.
I'll go evaluate prospects 50 through 100 on the defensive side. That will also be helpful for our exercise we are doing next week. Michael Rand's going to join the 3 of us, and all of us together are going to do a mock draft for the NFC North. We're going to go through 3 rounds. Ben's the Vikings, Andrew's the Packers, Rand's going to be the Bears, and I'll be the Lions. So any pitches any listeners have about what the Vikings should do, send them Ben's way. I think I know what he's going to do with his 2 picks that he'll have in the whole mock draft.
Works.
He's going to spend the 3rd round pick to trade up with the 1st round to get Malachi Starks.
Yep.
Malachi Starks 5th overall. See y'all later. Let me know how the podcast goes.
He's not letting anyone buy. He's getting Malachi Starks if it's the end of it.
Elbow everybody out of the way.
So we'll have that. I think the plan is to have it out Tuesday morning for everyone listening, and then it'll be draft time, and we'll be talking. We'll know whether Malachi Starks is the Cam Bynum replacement or not. So Thanks for listening today to this episode. You can keep up with all of our other draft coverage online at thestartribune.com, and we will talk to you all again soon.